The cold of the marble floor seeped through the thin silk of Elara's wedding gown. A chill that had nothing to do with the autumn draft creeping through the cracked window of the east wing. Her fingers, pale and trembling, traced the intricate pattern of the mosaic tiles, a pattern she had memorized over the long, agonizing hours of her final night. The scent of blood, thick and metallic, mingled with the lingering sweetness of the wine she had been forced to drink at her own wedding feast. She had been so naive then, so full of hope. Now hope was a cruel joke, a phantom that had abandoned her long ago. The door to her chambers swung open, and the torchlight from the corridor spilled in, illuminating the faces of her tormentors. Her husband, Crown Prince Aldrich, stood in the doorway, his handsome features twisted into a mask of cold disdain. Beside him her sister Lady Seraphina, clung to his arm like a vine to a dying oak, her golden hair catching the firelight, her eyes gleaming with triumph. Behind them, her father Lord Edmund Ashford, lingered in the shadows, his face impassive, as if he were observing a Miwe rocket transaction rather than the slow murder of his eldest daughter. You always were so terribly predictable, Aldrich said, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. He stepped into the room, his boots clicking against the marble, each step a death knell. Did you truly believe I would ever love you, you the plain, dull daughter of a minor lord, when your sister, he gestured to Seraphina, who simpered on cue, possesses the beauty and wit befitting a future queen? Elara tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat, tangled with the blood that trickled from the corner of her mouth. The dagger wound in her side burned with a cold fire, and she pressed her palm against it, feeling the warmth of her own life slipping through her fingers. You promised, she gasped. You said I was enough. Seraphina laughed, a tinkling sound that had once seemed innocent but now grated like broken glass. Us? Did you truly believe a man like Aldrich could be satisfied with a woman who offers nothing but devotion? Devotion is for dogs, not queens. He needed someone who could give him power, influence, someone whose family could secure his throne, and father. She glanced back at Lord Edmund, who nodded in grim agreement. Father understood that better than anyone. Elara's gaze shifted to her father, the man who had raised her, who had taught her to read, to pray, to be a proper lady. She searched his face for any flicker of remorse, any sign that the man who had once held her on his knee was still somewhere inside that cold, calculating shell. But all she found was impatience. Don't look at me like that, Elara, Lord Edmund said, his voice flat. You were always the weaker of the two. Seraphina has ambition. She understands that in this world, one must claw and scrape to survive. You simply expected everything to be handed to you. It is time you learned how the world truly works. The words hit her like physical blows, each one more devastating than the last. She had given them everything. Her loyalty, her trust, her innocence. She had believed in Aldrich's whispered promises, in Seraphina's feigned sisterly affection, in her father's stern but steady guidance, and all the while, they had been weaving a tapestry of betrayal, thread by thread, until the day it wrapped around her throat and pulled tight. Please, Ro whispered, her voice barely audible, I have nothing. You have taken everything from me, my dowry, my lands, my dignity. Just let me live. I will disappear. I will go to the countryside. Levicus, you will never hear from me again. Aldrich knelt beside her, his eyes meeting hers with a mockery of tenderness. You think I would let you live, my dear wife? You reliability now, a loose thread in a tapestry I cannot afford to have unraveled. Besides, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, your death serves a purpose. It solidifies my alliance with your father. It allows Seraphina to step into the role she was always meant to have, and it sends a clear message to anyone who might think to cross me. I do not suffer failures. Seraphina glided forward, her silk slippers silent on the marble. She knelt on the other side of Elara, her blue eyes wide with feigned sympathy. Don't look so frightened, sister. Death is merely a transition. You are going to a better place, and I will take such good care of your memory. I will make sure everyone remembers you as the tragic, fragile soul who simply could not bear the weight of the crown. Elara felt a surge of rage, hot and fierce, cutting through the fog of pain. With the last of her strength, she reached up and grabbed Seraphina's wrist, her nails digging into the soft flesh. You are not my sister, she hissed. You are a viper dressed in silk, and you. She turned her gaze to Aldrich, her eyes burning with a hatred so profound it felt like a living thing. You will never know peace. Every victory you claim will taste like ash. Every joy will be hollow. I curse you, Aldrich, I curse all of you. May the gods witness my dying breath and remember it when your sins finally catch up with you. Aldrich's expression flickered, a brief flash of unease that he quickly masked with a sneer. A dying woman's ravings, he said, standing and brushing off his robes as if she had dirtied him. Finish it. Seraphina pulled a small vial from the folds of her gown. A vial of poison. That she had likely been crying for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. She uncorked it, and the sharp, bitter scent of nightshade filled the air. This will be quicker than the dagger, she murmured. A small mercy. Sister, you should thank me. Elara tried to struggle, but her body was too weak, too broken. Seraphina tilted her chin up, forcing her mouth open, and poured the poison down her throat. The liquid burned as it went down, a fire that spread through her chest, her stomach, her veins. The pain was excruciating, worse than the dagger, worse than anything she had ever known. Her vision blurred, the torchlight smearing into a haze of gold and red. She heard Seraphina's soft, satisfied sigh, Aldrich's curt order to the Gaillards to clean up the mess, and her father's cold, dispassionate footsteps as he walked away. And then there was Rockness, a void so deep and silent it seemed to swallow everything. Her pain, her rage, her very existence. For a moment, there was nothing, no fear, no regret, no sorrow, just an endless, empty peace. But peace, Eleron, was not her destiny. The Rockness shattered, a blinding light flooded her senses, so bright it seemed to burn away the very fabric of her being. She gasped involuntary intake of breath that filled her lungs with air so fresh and clean it made her head spin. Her eyes flew, and she found herself staring at a ceiling she had not seen in years. The familiar, cracked plaster of her childhood bedroom. Round window that overlooked the gardens where she used to play. The faded tapestry of the hunt that had hung on the wall since before she was born. She was lying in her childhood bed, the sheets soft and worn beneath her trembling fingers. The scent of lavender drifted from the sachet tucked under her pillow. The same sachet her mother had sewn for her before she died. But her mother had been dead for a decade, and Elara had been dead for hours. Or had she? She sat up slowly, her heart pounding so violently she could feel it in her throat. Her hands, she looked down at them, were smooth and unblemished, no calluses, no scars, no blood. She touched her side, where the dagger had struck, and found only unbroken skin. Her reflection in the small, tarnished mirror across the room was that of a girl of 17, not the hollow-eyed, faded woman she had become in her final years. She was alive, but this was not the life she had left behind. This was a life that had ended before it had truly begun. A life she had been given a second chance to live. To shape. To burn to the ground and rebuild from the ashes. The door creaked open, and a maid entered. A young girl with a familiar, freffy lady. The maid said, curtsying nervously. Your father requests your presence in the great hall. There is a visitor. Someone important. Elara's blood ran cold. She knew this day. She had lived it before. It was the day her father had introduced her to Crown Prince Aldrich, the day she had smiled shyly and accepted his proposal, the day her life had begun its slow, agonizing descent into hell, the day he had offered her up as a sacrifice to his ambition, a pawn in his endless, ruthless game. But, Elara knew exactly what she was walking into. She knew the lies, the betrayals, the cold, calculating faces of the people who would smile at her even as they sharpened their knives, and she knew, with a certainty that burned brighter than any fear, that this time, she would be the one holding the blade. She rose from the bed, her legs steady despite the tremor in her hands. She walked to the mirror and studied her reflection. The wide, trusting eyes that had once been her undoing. The soft, innocent face that had made her so easy to deceive. She would use that face now, wield it like a weapon. She would smile, and they would see the same foolish girl they had destroyed. But beneath that mask a wildfire raged. Tell my father I will be there shortly, she said, her voice even and calm, betraying nothing of the storm within her. And tell him I am eager to meet his important guest. The maid curtsied and hurried away, leaving Elara alone with her reflection. She reached up and touched her face, feeling the double earth of living skin beneath her fingertips. The pain of her death was still fresh, the memory of the poison burning in her throat. But with it came a clarity she had never known. A crystalline understanding of the game she had been forced to play, and the players who had used her as a pawn. She would play their game, yes. But she would play it with her own rules. She would unravel their schemes thread by thread, expose their secrets, and make them watch as everything they had built crumbled to dust. She would take Aldrich's crown, Seraphina's, her father's influence, and she would smash them all at their feet. The gown she wore was simple, a pale blue that had once been her favorite. She smoothed the fabric, noting how it clung to a body that was still young, still strong, still unbroken. She pinned her dark hair up with quick, efficient movements, leaving a few loose strands to frame her face. She looked every inch the knave, obedient daughter they expected her to be. But as she stepped out of her chamber and walked toward the great hall, the tap of her heels echoing on the marble floor, it was a smile that did not reach her eyes. A predator's smile. Sharp hungry. You gave me to a disgraced crown prince my sister rejected. Father, she thought as she descended the grand staircase. But you made one mistake. You let me survive, and now, I will show you what a woman forged in the fires of betrayal can truly do. The great hall loomed before her, its doors thrown wide. She could see them gathered inside. Her father, his back straight and unyielding, Aldrich, young and handsome, his arrogant smile firmly in place, and hovering at the edge of the group, already casting covetous glances at the prince who had not yet chosen her. Elara paused at the threshold, her hand resting lightly on the ornate wooden frame. For a moment, she let herself feel the weight of her past, the despair, the helplessness, the bitter, soul-crushing loneliness. She let it wash over her, let it fuel the fire in her chest. Then she lifted her chin, square-read her shoulders, and stepped into the light. The prince turned as she entered, his eyes sweeping over her with the dismissive, appraising glance she remembered so well. And this must be the Lady Elara, he said, his voice dripping with practiced charm. I had heard you were lovely, but the rumors do not do you justice. Her movements graceful and demure. You flatter me, your highness, she said, her voice soft and sweet, a perfect imitation of the girl she had been. But I fear I am but a simple country lady, unworthy of such praise. Seraphina stepped forward, her smile bright and practiced. Oh, Elara is too modest, she said, slipping an arm around her sister in a gesture of forced sisterly affection. She is the most accomplished woman in our household. So skilled in music and embroidery, you will find no better wife, your highness, I assure you. Elara felt the familiar sting of her sister's betrayal, the way Seraphina's words painted her as a domesticated, docile creature, a perfect, pliable wife. The sting was tempered by a cold, knowing satisfaction. You think you know me, Seraphina, she thought. But you do not know the woman I have become, and by the time you do, it will be far too late. Aldrich stepped closer, his gaze lingering on Elara in a way that would have made her blush in another life. Now it only made her skin crawl. I believe we shall get along famously, he said, his voice low and intimate. A woman of quiet grace is exactly what I need in a wife. Elara met his, and for just a fraction of a second, she let the mask slip. Let him see the glint of steel beneath the silk. I do hope so, your highness, she said, her voice still soft, but with an edge that made him pause. I would hate to disappoint. The prince blinked, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face, before he recovered with a smooth laugh. I am certain you could never disappoint, lady. But as he turned away to speak with her father, Elara saw the doubt lingering in his eyes. She had planted a seed, a tiny, almost imperceptible crack in his confidence. She would nurture it, water it with careful words and calculated actions, until the crack became a chasm wide enough to swallow him whole. Seraphina squeezed her air, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. He is perfect, isn't he? So handsome, so powerful. You are truly the luckiest woman in the realm. Elara turned to her sister, her smile serene and utterly false. She said softly, has nothing to do with it. She looked out over the hall, at the gilded walls and the glittering chandeliers, at the nobles who would one day bow to her, or burn alongside her enemies. She had been given a second chance, a gift from the gods or fate or sheer, stubborn will, and she would not waste it. As the prince's retinue filed in and the servants began to prepare for the formal announcement of their betrothal, Elara stood at the center of it all, a vision of fragile beauty, a lamb walking willingly into the lion's den. But she was no lamb, she was a wolf in sheep's clothing, and she was ready to devour them all. The game had begun, and this time, Elara intended to win. The formal announcement of her betrothal to Crown Prince Aldrich was made 3 days later, in the grand ballroom of Ashford Manor. Elara stood on the raised dais beside her future husband, her hands clasped demurely before her, her smile fixed and radiant. To the assembled nobles, she was the picture of a blushing, grateful bride-to-be. To Aldrich, who glanced at her with possessive satisfaction, she was a conquest already won. To Seraphina, who watched from the crowd with barely concealed envy, she was an obstacle soon to be removed. Ra saw it all. She saw the way Seraphina's fingers twisted in the folds of her emerald gown, the way her gaze flickered to Aldrich with hungry longing. She saw her father, Lord Edmund, nodding with grim approval as the betrothal contract was read aloud. his eyes already calculating the political capital this union would bring. She saw the nobles whispering behind their fans, speculating on the dowry, the lands, the influence that would change hands, and she saw Aldrich's hand, resting lightly on her waist, a gesture that was meant to appear affectionate but felt like a brand. In her previous life, she had interpreted that touch as dolorous, as the promise of a shade-red future. Now, she knew it for what it was, a claim of ownership, a marquee of possession. The ceremony ended with a toast, and the ballroom erupted in applause. Elara accepted the congratulations with practiced grace, her smile never faltering, even as her mind churned with cold calculation. She had 3 months until the wedding, 3 months to gather information, build alliances, and prepare her counterstrike. 3 months to turn their carefully laid plans into a trap of their own making. As the festivities wound down and the guests began to disperse, Elara excused herself to the terrace, needing a moment of air away from the suffocating pretense. The night sky was clear, the stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet darkness. She leaned against the balustrade, letting the cool breeze soothe her flushed skin. She did not hear the footsteps approach, but she felt them, the subtle shift in the air, the faint rustle of silk. "You look troubled," Seraphina said, her voice a silken purr as she emerged from the shadows. "Shouldn't you be celebrating? You have captured the most eligible bachelor in the kingdom. Or have you finally realized the weight of what you have agreed to?" Elara did not turn around. She kept her gaze fixed on the distant tree line, her expression serene. "I am merely contemplating the future, Seraphina, a habit I have recently acquired." Seraphina moved to stand beside her, her golden hair gleaming in the moonlight. "The future," she repeated, her tone laced with mockery. "What future? Exactly, you will be Aldrich's wife, yes. But what will that make you, a queen? Aldrich is a disgraced Elara. His father has all but disowned him. The throne will go to his younger brother, and you will be relegated to the role of a provincial duchess. A pretty ornament in a crumbling castle. You should be grateful. At least you will be comfortable." Elara finally turned to face her sister, her smile sharp as a blade. "Is that what you tell yourself, seer? That you are better off because you were not chosen? That I am the unfortunate one, trapped in a loveless marriage to a man of diminished prospects?" Seraphina's composure flickered. "I never said that. You didn't have to." Elara stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I know what you want, Seraphina. I have always known. You want Aldrich. You want his title, his name, his influence. You wanted him the moment he walked into our home. And you were furious when father chose me to be his bride instead of you. You thought you were the more beautiful one, the more clever one. You thought you deserved him." Seraphina's eyes flashed with anger. "Do not presume to know my Elara. You are nothing but a knave, foolish girl who stumbled into a fortune she does not deserve. Aldrich only chose you because father demanded it, because your dowry was larger. It was a business transaction." Elara laughed, a soft, musical sound that did not reach her eyes. "And here I am, engaged to the prince you covet, married to the man you want. You can seethe and scheme all you like. It will not change the fact that I am the one wearing his ring." Seraphina's hand shot out, grabbing Elara's wrist with a grip that was surprisingly strong. "You think you have won something," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You have won nothing. Aldrich is a desperate man, and he will use you until you are empty, then discard you like a torn gown. Father will let him, because father only cares about power, and she smiled a cold, predatory smile. "I will be waiting for your marriage to fall apart, waiting for him to realize his mistake, and when that day comes, I will take everything you have." Elara did not pull away. She met her sister's gaze unflinching. "Then we understand each other," she said calmly. "You are my enemy, I am yours. Let us not pretend otherwise." Seraphina released her wrist, stepping back with a look of contempt. "You are a fool, Elara. You have no allies, no resource. You are a lamb walking into a slaughterhouse, and you are too blind to see it. I almost pity you." With that, she turned and swept back into the ballroom, her gown trailing behind her like a banner of war. Elara watched her go, her heart pounding, but her face remained impassive. Seraphina was right about one thing. She had no allies, no resources, no power, but she had something far more valuable. She had knowledge. She knew the future in her previous life. Seraphina's schemes had unfolded with devastating precision. She had whispered poison into Aldrich's ear, planted rumors of infidelity, and manufactured evidence of treason, all to convince Aldrich that Elara was a liability that needed to be eliminated, and he had believed her, because he had wanted to believe. He had been looking for an excuse to rid himself of a wife, who had outlived her usefulness. But this, Elara knew the accusations before they were made. She knew the names of the spies, the dates of the meetings, the forged documents that would be used to seal her fate. She knew the future, and she intended to weaponize it. She remained on the terrace for a long moment, letting the Seoul air clear her mind. When she finally returned to the ballroom, she was smiling again, the serene, placid smile of a dutiful bride. She mingled with the guests, accepted their congratulations, and played the role they expected of her. But her mind was elsewhere, cataloging faces, noting alliance, filing away every piece of information that might prove useful. By the time the last guest's départ rotted and the servants began to extinguish the candles, Ilar was exhausted but exhilarated. She had survived the first battle. She had planted the seeds of doubt in Seraphina's mind and put Aldrich on notice. Just really. Just enough to make him wonder if his bride was truly as pliable as she read. She retired to her chamber, dismissing her handmaidens with a wave of her hand. The room was quiet, lit only by the dying embers of the fire. She sat down at her vanity, staring at her reflection in the dim light, and let the mask fall. The face that stared back at her was young, but the eyes were old. They had seen death, they had tasted poison, they had felt the cold, final embrace of the void, and they had emerged from it with a fire that would not be extinguished. There you are, said a low, amused voice from the window. I was beginning to think you had gone to bed. Ra spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. A figure stood in the shadows by the casement, a tall, lean man with dark features and dark eyes that glinted with intelligence. He was dressed in black, his clothing simple but well made, and he carried himself with the easy confidence of a man who was never where he was supposed to be. Allah Ryu, Elara demanded, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. She reached for the dagger she had hidden beneath her pillow, her fingers closing around the cold hilt. The man stepped forward into the firelight, and Elara's breath caught. She recognized him, not from this life, but from the one before. He was the spy she had seen from her window, the servant with the straight posture and the burning eyes. But here, in the intimate glow of her chamber, he looked anything but a servant. Forgive the intrusion, my lady, he said, bowing with a flourish that was almost mocking. I am called Damien, and I believe we have a mutual interest. And what interest would that be? Her fingers still gripping the dagger, Damien smiled, a slow, devastating smile that did not reach his eyes. I work for your future husband's greatest enemy, he said calmly, the King of Viridia, and I am here to offer you a deal. Mind raced. She had heard of the King of Viridia, a powerful, ruthless monarch who had been locked in a bitter feud with Aldrich's family for decades. In her previous life, this conflict had been a distant backdrop, a political chess game that had never directly touched her, but now it was at her doorstep. A spy, she said flatly. You come to me in the dead of night, offering me a deal. Why would I trust you? For all I know, you are one of Aldrich's men, testing my loyalty. Damien's smile widened. If I were one of Aldrich's men, I would have already slit your throat and reported that you were a liability. The fact that I am standing here, speaking to you, should be proof enough that I am not. He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. I know what you are, Lady Elara. I do not know how and I do not see. But I know that you are not the simple, innocent girl you pretend to be. I saw the way you looked at Aldrich tonight. That was not the look of a woman in love. That was the look of a woman plotting. Elara stared at him, her mind churning. He was right, she had let her guard slip, just for a moment, and he had seen it. He was dangerous, but he was also useful. What kind of deal? She asked, her voice briefly neutral. Damien's expression grew serious. The King of Viridia wants Aldrich dead. He wants his allies crushed, his influence destroyed, his legacy erased. I have been tasked with finding the means to make that happen, and I believe you, Lady Elara. The means thou is here raced. This was the opening she had been waiting for. An ally. A way to strike at Aldrich from the shadows. But she was not foolish enough to trust a stranger, no matter how charming or persuasive. Let us say I believe you, she said slowly. What do you want from me? Damien leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. I want information, secrets. I want you to be my eyes and ears in Aldrich's household, to report everything you see and hear. I will provide you with protection. And, when the time comes, a way out. Elara considered his offer. It was tempting, more than tempting. It was the key to everything she wanted. But she knew better than to accept blindly. I will agree to your terms, she said, but on one condition. I will not simply be your spy. I will be your partner. I will provide information, yes, but I will also have a say in how it is used. When we move against Aldrich, I will be there. I will not be a pawn, Damien. I will be a player. Damien's eyes widened slightly, then I rowed with new respect. You're a surprising woman. Lady Ella Rod. I think you may be exactly what we need. He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Elar took it. His grip was firm, his skin arm against hers. Then we have an accord, he said. I will contact you through the servant who tends the Gradens. He is one of ours. Trust no one else, not even your maids. With that, he released her hand and stepped back toward the window. One more thing, he added, pausing at the casement, be full of Seraphina. She is more dangerous than you know. She has already made contact with Aldrich's enemies. Not out of loyalty to the king, but out of spite. She wants to destroy you. And she will do anything to achieve that goal. Elara nodded, her expression grim. I know. She made that clear tonight. Damien gave her one last, lingering look, his dark eyes unreadable. Good night. No, I look forward to our partnership. Then he was gone, vanishing into the night as silently as he had read. Elara stood alone in her chamber, the cold wind from the open window ruffling her hair. She walked to the casement and looked out into the darkness. But there was no sign of him. Just the rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. She closed the window and secured the latch, her mind racing with the implications of what had just happened. She had just made a deal with a spy. A deal that could end in her death if she was not careful, but she had also secured an ally, a resource, a weapon. And she would need every weapon she could find. She lay down in her bed, staring up at the ceiling as the fire crackled and died. Sleep did not come easily. She replayed the events of the evening. The betrothal, Seraphina's threats, Damien's offer. Every thread was connected, every move a step on the chessboard. But as dawn began to creep over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Elara felt a flicker of something she had not experienced in years. Not the naive, fragile hope of her youth, but a tempered hope, a hope that burned with the certainty of revenge. She would survive, she would win, and when the time came, she would watch Aldrich and Seraphina and her father fall, until nothing remained but the ashes of their ambition. And she would smile as the flames consumed them all. The weeks following her betrothal passed in a blur of measured smiles and carefully scripted conversations. Elara moved through the motions of wedding preparation with the precision of a clockwork doll, selecting fabrics, tasting, reviewing guest lists, while her mind worked tirelessly beneath the surface. Every interaction was an opportunity, every word, a thread to be pulled. She lay around to read the household like a map. The head housekeeper, a stout woman named Mrs. Rouleau, had a weakness for gossip and a fondness for coin. The stablemaster, a grizzled veteran named Tobias, owed his position to Lord Edmund and Echar bore a quiet resentment for his employer's stinginess. The kitchen maids traded secrets like currency, and the footmen moved through the corridors with ears wide open. Elara catalogued them all. She identified the loyalists, the malcontents, the ones who could be turned, and the ones who would need to be avoided. She had no illusions about her position. She was a bride in name only, a hostage in all but chains. But she was determined to build her own network, brick by brick. Her first real test came on a crisp autumn afternoon, when Seraphina invited her to take tea in the garden. The invitation was delivered by a nervous maid, and Elara knew immediately that it was a trap. Seraphina never did anything without an ulterior motive, and her sudden display of sisterly affection was a red flag she could not ignore. Still she accepted. To refuse would be to show weakness, to admit that she read her sister's machinations, and Elara read nothing, not anymore. She arrived at the Gradin pavilion to find Seraphina already seated, a delicate porcelain cup in her hand, her golden hair gleaming in the dappled sunlight. The table was laid with an elaborate spread of pastries and fruit, a feast that seemed almost ostentatious for a simple afternoon tea. Elara noted the arrangement with a flicker of suspicion. Seraphina was trying to charm her, to lull her into a false sense of security. Seraphina said, her smile warm and inviting, "How wonderful of you to join me. I have been so looking forward to spending time with you. We have so much to discuss before the wedding." Elara took her seat, smoothing her skirts with a practiced gesture. "Indeed we do. I am sure you have many opinions on how the celebration should proceed." Seraphina laughed, a light, tinkling sound that grated on Elara's nerves. "Oh, I am certain you have everything well in hand. You always were so meticulous, Elara. It is one of your finer qualities." She leaned forward, her blue eyes wide with feigned sincerity. "I want you to know, sister, that I wish you nothing but happiness. Aldrich is a fortunate man to have won your hand, and she paused, a delicate flush coloring her cheeks. I have been thinking. Perhaps I was too rash with you at the betrothal feast. I spoke from a place of jealousy, and I am truly sorry. Elara studied her sister's face, searching for the lie beneath the honeyed words. It was there, hidden in the faint tightness around her eyes, the almost imperceptible curl of her lip. Seraphina was not sorry she was plotting. Yeri too, Elara replied, her voice soft and forgiving. I understand your feelings. It cannot be easy, watching your sister marry before you, especially when you hatch airborne hopes of your own. But I am sure that your match will come soon enough. You are beautiful and clever. Any man would be fortunate to have you. Seraphina's smile flickered, just for a moment. The compliment was a weapon, a subtle reminder of her failure to secure Aldrich's interest, but she recovered quickly, reaching for a pastry with graceful composure. You are too generous, Seraphina said. But I did not invite you here simply to reminisce. I have a gift for you, a wedding gift, to mark your new status. She produced a small velvet box from the folds of her gown and slid it across the table. Open it. Elara took the box, her fingers brushing against the soft fabric. She felt a flicker of unease, a prickle at the back of her neck that warned her of danger. But she could not refuse without arousing suspicion. She lifted the lid. Inside lay a bruch, a stunning piece of artistry, crafted from gold and studded with rubies that seemed to glow with an inner fire. It was beautiful, exquisitely made, and utterly out of place in Seraphina's possession. Elara recognized it immediately. It had belonged to her mother, a heirloom that had been lost years ago, supposedly sold to settle a debt. Where did you get this? Elara asked, her voice reefily neutral. Seraphina smiled a cat's smile. I found it in father's study, tucked away in a drawer. He had been keeping it for you, I think, waiting for the right moment. But I persuaded him to let me give it to you, as a token of my affection. I know how much you miss mother. I thought you should have something of hers to see with you into your new life. Elara's fingers tightened on the box. She knew this was a lie. Her mother's jewels had been sold years ago, and Seraphina had been the one to orchestrate the sale, pocketing the proceeds for her own wardrobe. This brooch was a fake, a clever copy, perhaps made to resemble the original. But the question was why? What did Seraphina hope to gain by giving her a counterfeit heirloom? She looked up, meeting her sister's eyes. It is a lovely thought, she said softly. I will treasure it. She pinned the brooch to her gown, feeling the weight of it against her chest. It was a trap. She knew it was a trap, but she did not yet understand the mechanism. She would wear it, watch it, wait for the moment when its purpose became clear. The rest of their tea passed in a haze of polite conversation and veiled threats. Seraphina spoke of the upcoming wedding with enthusiasm, offering suggestions for the decorations, the music, the guest list. She spoke of Aldrich with a familiarity that bordered on possessive, describing his tastes, his habits, his preferences as if she had known him for years. Elara listened, nodded, and filed away every word. When the tea was finished and Seraphina had decorated with a flutter of silk and a final lingeril, Elara returned to her chamber. She removed the brooch and examined it closely, turning it over in her hands. The gold was warm to the touch, the rubies flawless, but there was something wrong with the clasp. A tiny, almost invisible seam that suggested the brooch could be opened. She fetched a small knife from her vanity and pried at the seam. The brooch sprang open, revealing a hollow compartment lined with velvet. Inside was a folded piece of parchment, yellowed with age. Elara unfolded it with trembling fingers. The letter was written in a hand she recognized. Her mother's elegant, flowing script. It was addressed to Lord Edmund, and it spoke of debts and betrayals, of secrets that could tear the family apart. It mentioned a name that made Elara's blood run cold. Aldrich's father, the old king. And it hinted at a conspiracy that went far deeper than she had ever imagined. Her mother had known. She had known about the plots, the schemes, the alliances that had been forged in shadow. And she had been silenced for her knowledge. Elara read the letter 3 times, committing every word to memory. Then she folded it carefully and replaced it in the brooch, snapping the clasp shut. She had been wrong about Seraphina's motives. This was not a trap designed to harm her. It was a weapon, a key to a door she had not known existed. But why had Seraphina given it to her? Did she understand the contents of the letter, or was she simply a pawn in a La Roger game? The questions circled in her mind. Unanswered, one thing was certain. Her mother's death had not been an accident, and Aldrich's family was involved. That evening, Elara found an excuse to walk in the gardens. The autumn air was crisp, the leaves crunching beneath her feet, and the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and violet. She knew the Jardiner would be waiting. Damien's contact, a quiet, unassuming man named Thorn. She found him pruning a hedge near the eastern wall, his movements slow and deliberate. He did not look up as she approached, but his voice was low and clear. My lady, you have news. Elara stopped beside him, her gaze fixed on the distant tree line. I have discovered something. A letter, hidden in a brooch given to me by my sister. It was written by my mother, and it implicates Aldrich's family in a conspiracy. I need to know more. Thorn's hands stilled for a moment, then resumed their work. The King of Viridia will want to see this. Can you bring it to me tomorrow night? I can do better than that, Elara said. I can give you the contents now. I have memorized them. She recited the letter from memory, her voice low and steady. Thorn listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he nodded once, a small, almost imperceptible gesture. This changes things, he said quietly. The king will be pleased, but you must be careful, my lady. Your sister would not have given you that brooch without a reason. She is testing you, or she is using you. Either way she is dangerous, Elara said. But I am not the same woman I was. I will not be used again. Thorn turned to look at her, his dark eyes piercing. He agreed. You were not, but she does not know that yet. Use her ignorance to your advantage. Let her think she is the clever one, the one pulling the strings, and when she least expects it, you will cut her strings and watch her fall. Elara smiled, a hard smile that did not reach her eyes. That is exactly what I intend to do. She left the Jrodin as the last light faded from the sky, her mind churning with new possibilities. The letter was a revelation. A piece of the puzzle that had been missing. It connected Aldrich's family to her mother's death. And it suggested a web of corruption that extended to the highest levels of the kingdom. But it also raised a troubling question. If her mother had known about the conspiracy, why had she not exposed it? What had she been protecting, or who? The answer, Elara suspected, lay with her father. Lord Edmund was a calculating man, but he was also a coward. He would not have been involved in anything that risked his own position. But if her mother had discovered a secret that could destroy the royal family, he would have had every reason to silence her. The thought made Elara's blood boil. Her father had murdered her mother, or allowed her to be murdered, to protect his own interests. And he had raised his children in the shadow of that crime, never once showing remorse. She would make him pay. She would make them all pay. Elara entered the house through a side door, hoping to avoid the notice of the servants. But as she stepped into the corridor, she found herself face to face with Aldrich, who had apparently arrived unannounced. He was standing in the shadows, his tall frame silhouetted against the firelight from the main hall. He said, his voice smooth and amused, I was hoping to find you. Your father told me you were in the Jrodins. I trust you are enjoying the evening air. Elara forced a smile. Your Highness, I did not expect you so soon. Is something wrong? Aldrich stepped closer, his eyes glinting with an unreadable emotion. Nothing is wrong. I simply wish to see my betrothed. It has been too long since we last spoke. He reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. You look beautiful tonight. The moonlight suits you. Elara felt the familiar revulsion rise in her throat, but she forced herself to remain still. You are too kind, Your Highness. Aldrich said, his voice dropping to a whisper. But kindness has never been among them. I am ambitious and I am patient, and I always get what I want. He leaned in, his lips brushing against her ear. I want you, Elara, I want you by my side. Standing with me when I take what is rightfully mine. And I will have you, one way or another. Elara's hair pounded, but her voice was steady. You already have me, Your Highness. I am your betrothed. Aldrich laughed, a low dangerous sound. Betrothed is not the same as owned, but it will be soon enough. He pulled back, studying her face with a predatory smile. Enjoy your evening, my lady. I will return on the morrow to discuss the wedding arrangements with your father, and perhaps if you are amenable, we might take a ride together. He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Elara stood frozen in the corridor, her hands clenched at her sides. She had just been given a wooey running and an invitation, both disguised as affection. She retreated to her chamber, her mind raced. Aldrich was growing impatient. He wanted to solidify his claim on her, to ensure she could not slip away, and, with her counterfeit brooch and her honeyed lies, was playing a deeper game than Elara had anticipated. She sat down at her vanity and stared at her reflection. The girl in the mirror looked calm, composed, untouched by the turmoil within, but her eyes told a different story. They burned with a fire that had been kindled in the ashes of her death, a fire that would not be extinguished. She opened the brooch and took out the letter, reading it one more time, Then she placed it carefully back in its hiding place and closed the clasp. The pieces were falling into place. The conspiracy, the betrayal, the murder, all of it was connected. And she was at the center of it all. Tomorrow she would ride with Aldrich. She would smile and nod and play the rod of the devoted bride. But while he was distracted, she would plant another seed of doubt, gather another thread of information. She would weave her web slowly, carefully, until it was strong enough to hold them all. And when the moment came, she would strike with a fury that would make the heavens themselves tremble. But first, she needed to survive the ride. And she needed to learn exactly what Serafina hoped to gain from giving her that letter. The answer, she was certain, would be the key to everything. The morning of the ride dawned grey and cold. A thin mist clinging to the grounds of Ashford Manor like a shroud. Ella dressed with deliberate care, selecting a riding habit of deep forest green that complemented her dark hair and pale complexion. She pinned the brooch, her mother's brooch, the counterfeit heirloom, to the collar of her jacket, a silent reminder of the secrets she ride. Aldrich arrived promptly at the appointed hour, resplendent in black and silver, his stallion a magnificent beast of pure white that pranced with relay-contained energy. He dismounted with practiced grace, and offered Ella a hand that she accepted with a demure smile. "You look exquisite this morning, my lady," his eyes sweeping over her with proprietary satisfaction. "I do hope you are prepared for a long ride. I have a particular destination in mind." Ella allowed him to help her into the saddle of her own Miri, a gentle chestnut named Rosie, who had been her companion since childhood. "I am at your disposal, your highness. Lead the way." They rode in silence for the first mile, the only sounds the rhythmic thud of hooves and the distant call of birds. Ella used the time to study her companion. Aldrich was a man of contradictions, charming and ruthless, patient and impulsive. He wanted power more than anything, but he was also reckless, prone to taking risks that a more cautious man would avoid. It was a weakness she intended to exploit. As they entered the forest that bordered the Ashford lands, Aldrich finally spoke. "I have been thinking, Ella, about our future together. There are things you should know about my family, about the court, about the enemies I have made." Ella tilted her head, her expression curious. "I am listening." Aldrich's jaw tightened. "My father, the king, has never been kind to me. He favors my younger brother, sees him as the rightful heir, the golden child. I have been given scraps, titles that mean nothing, lands that yield little. But I intend to change that. With your help, I will claim what is mine." The words were familiar. A version of the same speech he had given her in her previous life, promising her a share of his ambition. She had believed him then, had thought herself a pioneer in his rise. She knew now that she had been nothing more than a stepping stone. "And what role do you envision for me in this grand plan?" she asked, keeping her voice light and curious. Aldrich turned to look at her, his eyes gleaming. "You will be my queen, not just a figurehead, but a true peer. Your father has influence, connections, wealth. With your family's support, I can build an alliance that will challenge my father's rule. Together we will be unstoppable." A arm. Trusting smile that masked the cold fury in her heart. "I am honored, your highness, truly. I will do everything in my power to support you." The ride continued deeper into the forest, the trees closing in around them, the path narrowing to a thin trail. Ella recognized this route. It led to an old hunting lodge, a secluded place where Aldrich had once brought her under the pretense of a romantic escape. In her previous life, it had been there that he had first shown his true colors, demanding she sign over her inheritance to fund his schemes. She had refused then, and he had been furious. The memory of that confrontation still burned, a scar on her soul. She was prepared. They reached the lodge an hour later, a crumbling stone building half swallowed by ivy. Aldrich dismounted and helped Ella down, his hands lingering on her waist a moment longer than necessary. "We will rest here," he said. "There is something I wish to discuss with you." Ra followed him inside, her senses on high alert. The lodge was dusty and neglected, the furniture covered in white sheets. A fire had been laid in the hearth, and Aldrich knelt to light it, the flames casting dancing shadows across his face. He gestured for her to sit on a worn settee, and she complied, her hands folded neatly in her lap. He paced before the fire, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression thoughtful. "I have been honest with you, Ella, about my ambitions," he began. "But there is something else I must tell you. Something that may change how you view me." Ella waited, her heart pounding. This was the moment she had been anticipating. "My father is dying," Aldrich said bluntly. "He has been ill for months, and the physicians give him little time. My brother, the Golden Prince, is preparing to take the throne, but I have no intention of letting that happen. He stopped pacing, turning to face her. I am going to claim the throne by force. Ilara. And I need your father's army to do it. Elara's breath caught. In her previous life, she had not learned of this plan until much later, when it was too late to escape its consequences. But now, she had the advantage of foreknowledge. She let her expression shift to one of shocked concern. Your Highness, that is treason. If you were caught, you would be executed. Aldrich's lips curled into a cruel smile. I will not be caught. I have allies within the palace, men who are loyal to me and to my cause. And with your father's soldiers, we will be unstoppable. I am not asking for your permission, Ilara. I am asking for your operation. And playing the part of a conflicted bride, my father would never agree to such a plan. He is a cautious man. Aldrich stepped closer, his voice dropping to a persuasive murmur. He will agree if you convince him. He wants power as I do. This is our path to it. Think of the future. You will be a queen, not just a duchess. Your children will be kings. Your name will be remembered for generations. The words were seductive, designed to appeal to her ambition. In her previous life, they had worked. She had convinced her father, and the rebellion had been launched. A rebellion that had failed, leaving Aldrich disgraced and her the scapegoat for his failures. But this time she knew the outcome. She knew that Aldrich's allies were not as loyal as he believed, that his plans were riddled with holes, that the king was already weary of his son's treachery. If she played her cards right, she could expose the conspiracy and destroy Aldrich without ever lifting a weapon. I will speak to my father, she said finally, her voice soft and uncertain, but I cannot promise anything. He is a stubborn man. Aldrich's face lit up with triumph. That is all I ask. I knew I could count on you, Elara. You are more than you appear. He reached out, tilting her chin up to meet his gaze. His thumb brushed across her lower lip. A gesture that was meant to be intimate but felt like a violation. I will make you a promise, my lady. When I am king, you will want for nothing. You will be the most powerful woman in the realm. Ilara smiled, grateful smile. I am already the most fortunate woman in the realm, she said. To be loved by a man such as you. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but she swallowed it with practiced ease. Aldrich was convinced of her loyalty. He had no idea that she was already planning his downfall. They returned to the manor as dusk was falling, the sky a canvas of deep purple and gold. Aldrich kissed her hand before departing, his manner gallant and charming. Elara watched him ride away, her smile fading the moment he was out of sight. She found her father in his study, reviewing ledgers by candlelight. He looked up as she entered. His expression guarded. I did not expect you back so soon. Was the ride pleasant? It was illuminating, Elara replied, closing the door behind her. Aldrich told me his plans, the rebellion, the coup. He intends to use your army to seize the throne. Lord Edmund's face went pale, then flushed with anger. He told you this? The fool. He cannot keep his own counsel for a single day. Elara moved to stand before his desk, her eyes fixed on his. He expects me to convince you to support him. He believes I am his willing bride, his devoted Pierrotner, but I am not father. I know what he is. I know what he intends to do to you once he has what he wants. Lord Edmund's eyes narrowed. Explain. Aldrich will use you, father. He will take your soldiers, your gold, your influence, and when he has no further use for you, he will discard you or worse. He is not a man who shares power, he is a man who devours it. She paused, letting her words sink in. I have seen the way he looks at you. The way he speaks of your holdings, your resources. He sees you as a tool, not as an ally. Her father's expression shifted from anger to uncertainty. He had always been suspicious of Aldrich, had always doubted his sincerity, but he had also been blinded by ambition, by the promise of a royal connection that would elevate their family. What do you propose? He asked slowly. Ra leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I propose that we do not support him. Let him believe he has our backing, let him commit his resources, expose his allies, make his move, and when he does, we will be ready to catch him in the trap he has set for himself. Lord Edmund studied her for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. You have changed, Elara. You are not the same girl who left this house. No, she agreed, her voice cold and steady. And that is precisely why you should trust me. There was a long silence, the only sound the crackling of the fire. Finally Lord Edmund nodded a slow, reluctant gesture. I will play along with his scheme, but if this goes wrong, Elara, the consequences will fall on you. I understand, father, and I accept the risk. She left the study with a sense of grim satisfaction. Her father was not an ally, he was a liability, a man who would sacrifice anyone to save himself, but for now he was useful. And she intended to use him as thoroughly as he had once used her. That night Elara could not sleep. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word of her conversation with Aldrich and her father. The pieces were in place, the trap was set. But she knew better than to become complacent. Serafina was still a violent. She had given Elara the brooch for a reason, and Elara had yet to uncover her true motive. She had also made contact with Aldrich's enemies, which meant she was playing her own game. A game that could collide with Elara's at any moment. And then there was Damien. She had not seen him since their first encounter, but she knew he was watching. She knew the king of Viridia was waiting for the right moment to strike. She was a player in a much larger game than she had anticipated. As dawn began to creep over the horizon, Elara made a decision. She would seek out Serafina and confront her, not with anger, but with curiosity. She would let her sister believe she was a naive, trusting fool, and she would watch, wait, and Liaron the next morning. She found Serafina in the conservatory, tending to a collection of orchids that had been a gift from Aldrich. The flowers were airy, exotic, and expensive, a testament to Aldrich's desire to court favor with her sister. Good morning, Serafina said, entering the conservatory with a smile. I hope I am not interrupting. Serafina looked up, her expression serifully neutral. Of course not, I was just admiring the orchids. Aldrich was so thoughtful to send them. He has such excellent taste. Elara moved to stand beside her sister, studying the flowers. He is a man of many talents. She paused, reaching up to touch the brooch at her collar. I wanted to thank you again for your gift. It is beautiful, and it has given me much to think about. Serafina's eyes flickered to the brooch, then back to Elara's face. She smiled, a slow-like smile. I am glad you like it. I thought you deserved something from mother. You never really got to know her, did you? She died so young. The words were pointed, a subtle dig at Elara's grief. Elara felt a surge of anger, but she kept her voice steady. I remember her well enough. She was a kind woman, a good woman. She deserved better than the hand she was dealt. Serafina's smile faltered just slightly. Yes, we all deserve better. She turned to face Elara fully, her eyes glittering with an unreadable emotion. Tell me, sister, how was your ride with Aldrich? Did he sweep you off your feet with his cheeram and his promises? He was very generous with his words, Elara said ruefully. And his plans? Serafina's nana rowed. Plans? Elara smiled an innocent, girlish smile. Oh, nothing important, just talk of the future, of building a life together. You know how men they love to dream. Serafina studied her for a long moment, clearly unsatisfied with the answer, but she let the subject drop, turning back to her orchids. You are a lucky woman, Ra. I hope you appreciate what you have. Elara said softly. And I will not forget it. She left the conservatory with her heart racing. Serafina was fishing for information, trying to determine how much Elara knew, and Elara had given her nothing, just a vague, placid smile and a non-answer. But she had also confirmed her suspicion. Serafina was a threat, not just to her, but to everything she was building. And she needed to be dealt with. Elara retreated to her chamber, her mind whirling with plans and counter-plans. She had allies now, her father, however reluctantly, Damien, however cautiously, and the king of Viridia, however distantly, but she also had enemies, and they were closing in. She took out the brooch, opened the hidden compartment, and read her mother's letter one more time. Then she sat down at her desk, dipped a quill in ink, and began to write. It was time to play the game on her own terms. 3 months had passed since Elara's rebirth, and the winter winds howled against the windows of Ashford Manor like a pack of starving wolves. The wedding was set for tomorrow. A grand affair that would unite the Vance family with the disgraced crown prince in what the kingdom believed to be a match of political convenience. But Elara knew the truth. Tomorrow would not be a wedding, it would be a reckoning. She stood before the mirror in her childhood chamber, the same mirror that had reflected her terrified face on the day of her first death. The girl who had stared back at her then was gone, replaced by a woman forged in fire and betrayal. The sapphire pendant her mother had left her hung at her throat, a cold weight against her skin. She touched it now, drawing strength from the memory of the mother she had lost, and the future she would claim. A soft knock at the door interrupted her reverie. Enter, she called, her voice steady. It was Lillian, her handmaiden, her face pale with worry. My lady, the prince has arrived. He wishes to see you before the ceremony tomorrow. He is waiting in the library. Elara nodded, her expression calm. Tell him I will be there shortly. She took a moment to compose herself, smoothing the folds of her gown and adjusting the pendant at her throat. The brooch Seraphina had given her, the counterfeit heirloom, the vessel of her mother's letter, was pinned to her bodice, a reminder of the secrets she carried. Tonight those secrets would become weapons. She descended the stairs with measured steps, her heart pounding but her face serene. The Libre was guère, a fire crackling in the hearth, and Aldrich stood before it, his back to her. He turned as she entered, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. He said, crossing the room to take her hands, "I could not wait until tomorrow. I had to see you, to tell you how eager I am for our future together." Ira smiled, letting him draw her close. "And I am eager as well, Your Highness. I have been thinking about your plans, about the rebellion, the coup. I have spoken with my father, and he is ready to offer his full support." Aldrich's face lit up with triumph. "Excellent. I knew you would come around. With your father's eye, we will be unstoppable tomorrow. After the wedding, we will begin the march to the capital. By the end of the week, I will be king." Elara nodded, her expression placid. "There is only one thing I ask, Aldrich. Before we proceed with the rebellion, I need you to do something for me." He raised an eyebrow, curious. "Name it?" "I need you to come with me to the old chapel, the one in the forest, tonight. There is something I wish to show you. Something that will ensure our victory." Aldrich's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering across his face. "The old chapel, why there?" Ilara said softly, leaning in to whisper in his ear. "That is where the king of Viridia is waiting with his terms." Aldrich went rigid, his hands tightening on her arms. "What are you talking about? The king of Viridia, what terms?" Ilara stepped back, her smile widening. "You didn't think you were the only one playing games, did you, Aldrich? The king of Viridia has been watching you for months. He knows about your rebellion, your allies, your plan. And he has offered me a better deal than you ever could." Aldrich's face contorted with rage. "You treacherous little." Ra interrupted, her voice cold and shy. "You are in my home, surrounded by my father's men. If you will not leave this manor alive." He stopped, his hands falling to his sides. His eyes burned with fury, but he forced himself to remain still. "What do you want, Ra?" "I want to meet the king of Viridia, Aldrich. I want to finalize the alliance, and I want you to come with me, as a witness, to prove that I am no longer your pawn." She paused, tilting her head. "Or you can stay here, and I will go alone. But then you will never know what deal is being made behind your back." Aldrich's jaw tightened, his pride a ring with his paranoia. Finally he nodded, a curt, reluctant gesture. "Fine, I will go with you. But if this is a trap, Ra, I swear." "It is not a trap," she said smoothly. "It is an opportunity. One you would be a fool to ignore." They left the manor under the cover of darkness, Ra leading the way through the frozen forest. The moon was hidden behind clouds, the path illuminated only by the lantern Aldrich carried. The wind cut through their cloaks, but Elara really felt it. She was too focused on what lay ahead. The old chapel was a ruin, its roof long collapsed, its walls covered in moss and ivy, but within its crumbling walls, a fire, casting flickering shadows across the stone floor. A figure stood beside the fire, tall and cloaked in black. Aldrich halted at the threshold, his hand going to the sword at his hip. "Who is there? Show yourself." The figure stepped forward, lowering the hood of his cloak. It was, his dark eyes gleaming with cold amusement. "Good evening, Your Highness. I trust you well." Aldrich's face went pale. "You are the king's. What is the meaning of this?" Ielra said, stepping past Aldrich to stand beside Damien. "Is that you have been outmaneuvered? The king of Viridia has offered me protection, and the promise of a life free from your ambition. In return I am giving him you." Aldrich's sword was out in an instant, his eyes wild with fury. "You bitch! You think you can betray me and get away with it?" Damien moved faster than Elara could follow, his blade meeting Aldrich's with a clash of steel. The two men circled each other, their breaths misting in the cold air. Elara, watching the dance unfold. "This has been coming for a long time." "Aldrich," she said, her voice calm and steady, "you used me, betrayed me and killed me, but I survived. I am taking back what you stole from me." Aldrich, his sword aimed at Damien's throat. Damien sidestepped, his blade slashing across Aldrich's arm. The prince cried out, his sword clattering to the ground. Damien disarmed him with a swift kick, then pressed his blade to Aldrich's throat. Damien said, his voice flat, "The king of Viridia will be pleased." Aldrich knelt on the ground, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. He looked up at Elara, his eyes burning with hatred. "You think you have won? You think this is the end? I will find a way to destroy you, Elara." Iwela knelt before him, her face inches from his. You will do nothing, Aldrich. Because you are going to rot in the king's dungeons for the rest of your miserable life, and while you are there, I will be rebuilding this kingdom. Without your ambition, without your lies, without your cruelty. She reached up and unclasped the brooch from her bodice, holding it before his eyes. This is my mother's letter. The evidence of your family's conspiracy. The king will use it to destroy your father, to dismantle your dynasty, to erase your name from history, and when he is done, no one will even remember that you existed. Aldrich's face went white. You would destroy my entire family. My father, my brother. Your family destroyed mine, Ylra said, her voice cold as ice. Your father killed my mother. Your brother covered it up. And you, she leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. You were the one who gave the order to poison me. I remember everything, Aldrich, every word, every breath, every moment of agony, and now, you will pay for all of it. Damien hauled Aldrich to his feet, binding his wrists with rope. The prince struggled, but it was useless. He was beaten, defeated, humiliated. Take him to the king, Ylra said. Tell him that the Vances are loyal allies. Tell him that I will be waiting for his instructions. Damien, a flicker of respect in his eyes. You are a formidable woman, Lady Ylra. The king chose well when he aligned himself with you. Ylra watched as Damien led Aldrich into the darkness. The sound of the prince's curses fading into the wind. She stood alone in the ruins of the chapel, the fire casting long shadows across the stone floor. The pendant at her throat felt arm against her skin, a reminder of her mother's strength. She had done it. She had avenged her mother, destroyed her enemies, and secured her future. But as she stood in the silence of the ruined chapel, she felt no triumph, only a hollow emptiness, a quiet that echoed through her soul. The next morning, the wedding did not happen. Aldrich was declared a traitor, his rebellion exposed, his allies arrested. The king of Viridia issued a proclamation, naming Ylra as a hero of the realm. A woman who had uncovered a plot to overthrow the crown and had risked everything to stop it. Ylra received the news with a calm smile. She sat in the conservatory, surrounded by Seraphina's orchids, the orchids that had been a gift from Aldrich, a symbol of his courtship. She had given them to the servants to dispose of, unable to bear the sight of them. Seraphina entered the conservatory, her face pale and drawn. You did this, she said, her voice trembling. You destroyed him. You destroyed all of us. Ylra looked up, her eyes cold. You gave me the brooch. Seraphina, you gave me the weapon. Did you truly think I would not use it? Seraphina's face crumpled. I thought you would confront him. That you would expose him and he would turn on you. You thought you would be the one to benefit. Ylra interrupted. You thought you would take my place and claim the power you believed you deserved. But you were wrong, Seraphina. You were always wrong. Seraphina fell to her knees, her hands clutching at Ylra's skirts. Please, Ylra, I am your sister. Have mercy on me. Ylra knelt beside her, taking her sister's face in her hands. You are not my sister, she said, her voice soft and cold. You are a viper who wore my mother's jewels and smiled while I died. You do not deserve mercy. But I will give you a chance. A chance to leave this place, to start a new life somewhere far away. Do not squander it. Seraphina's eyes filled with tears, but Ylra saw the hatred flickering beneath them. She knew her sister would never change, would never stop scheming, but she also knew that Seraphina was powerless now, stripped of her allies and her influence. Ylra said, rising to her feet, and do not return. Seraphina stumbled to her feet, her face twisted with bitterness. You will regret this, Ylra, one day. You will regret showing me mercy. I doubt it, Ylra said, turning away. But I will be ready if you try. As her sister fled the conservatory, Ylra walked to the window, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The snow was beginning to fall, blanketing the world in white. It was beautiful, serene, a stark contrast to the chaos of the past months. She reached up, touching the sapphire pendant at her throat, her mother's pendant, the only thing of value she had truly possessed. It had ride her through her darkest moments. A reminder of the love she had lost and the strength she had found. I did it, mother, she whispered, her breath fogging the glass. I avenged you, I destroyed them, and I will rebuild our family's legacy, piece by piece. She closed her eyes, letting the silence wash over her. The pain was still there, a dull ache in her chest, but it was fading, replaced by something new. Something fragile and unexpected, hope. A knock at the door broke the silence. Ylra turned to find Lillian standing in the doorway, her face flushed with excitement. My lady, there is a visitor, a messenger from the king of Viridia. He says the king wishes to meet you, personally, He says the king has admired your courage and wishes to offer you a position at court. Ylra's heart skipped a beat. A position at court. a chance to shape the future of the kingdom. To ensure that no woman would ever suffer as she had suffered. It was more than she had read to hope for. Tell the messenger I will meet with him shortly, she said, her voice steady, and Lillian, thank you. For Lillian curtsied, her eyes bright with tears. I am so proud of you, my lady. You have come so far. Alara smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. I have had help, she said softly, more than you know. As Lillian left, Alara stood alone in the conservatory, the snow falling softly outside. The weight of the past was still there, a heavy burden she would see awry forever, but it no longer crushed her. It had become a part of her, a source of strength rather than pain. She thought of Aldrich, rotting in the dungeons. She thought of Serafina, fleeing into the unknown. She thought of her father, who would spend the rest of his life trying to rebuild his reputation. And she thought of her mother, who had been silenced too soon. The game was over, she had won. But as she looked toward the horizon, Alara knew that this was only the beginning. The future was a vast, uncertain landscape, full of challenges and opportunities. And she was ready to face it all. She touched the pendant at her throat one last time. A silent promise to the woman who had given her life. I will make you proud, mother. I will build a world where no one is betrayed, no one is silenced, no one is forgotten. This is my vow, this is my purpose. And as she walked out of the conservatory to greet the king's messenger, Alara Vance smiled, a smile of quiet triumph. One victory, of hope reborn from the ashes of despair. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in silence. But in the heart of the woman who had survived death itself, a fire burned bright. A fire that would light the way to a new world, a better world, a world where she would no longer be a victim, but a queen.